Well, welcome everybody to a fantastic Monday morning here in the UK. It really is midsummer here, a little later than the actual chronological midsummer, but it's a very beautiful early summer's morning for us here in my country. We're on episode 168 of Level Up, 60 minutes of live Q&A, where your questions really do drive the show. Now, Ella and Shanice, they're both over in the social chat, so do please introduce yourself to them and let them know the city from where you're joining, of course. They will post some links into the chat so that you can vote up the questions that you would most like the panel to answer, and of course for you to be able to add your own. Now, if your question is selected, well, your name is going to appear in the credits at the end of the show as one of our producers. So do please get your questions in early and stay with us to see all of that happening. We continue to build out our production. And again, today, we're going to be using our electronic hand raise to be able to kind of show you which of the panelists are electing to answer different questions. So do watch out for that happening kind of throughout the show. 17 years ago, Clive Humby, who's a mathematician, famously said that data is the new oil, kind of beginning to trigger a debate, I would argue, as to how relatable that metaphor might be. Much like crude oil, unrefined data can clog up, of course, systems and processes, and it sluggishly makes its way around organizations, introducing lots of latency and spreading doubt about the accuracy and relevance of the data. In contrast, if it's well refined, accurate, and delivered in a timely fashion, it can be the fuel of digital transformation and remarkable innovation in organizations. So helping us figure out all of this is our panel of experts. So let's jump in straight away and meet them. Sarbojit Bose returns, regular panelist here on Level Up. He's the owner, of course, and the MD over at Cyberservices in Singapore, where he focuses on helping his clients adopt leading practice in the management and use of data and the security and services that go along with that. And welcome back to Level Up, Sarbojit. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, everyone, for having me here in this panel once again. And I'm looking forward for a wonderful time with all my panel peers here. So, and also, thank you for all those who are looking to ask the questions. Please let them come so we can answer them. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Sarbojit. Ahmad Javaid also joins us. He's the chief exec over at Cytellite, who focus on digital transformation with a proven success of solving complex problems. Ahmad and his team fuse technology into cohesive, value-driven business operations for their clients. Welcome back to Level Up, Ahmad. It's really lovely to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick, and very good morning, everyone. And I'm very much excited to engage with audience, answering the questions and share my knowledge and experience.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Sachin Melwani joined us. He's a project systems and business transformation consultant. He combines a deep knowledge of project and product development life cycles and methods. He also has a very strong background in IT, and he approaches change with a desire, I think it's fair to say, to help his clients adopt leading practice and make sure that they implement it thoroughly across their organization. Welcome back to Level Up, Sachin. Great to see you today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Nick, and the rest of the APMG team. A great panel, so please do use the slider functionality and ask questions in terms of ERP integration, machine learning, and AI, and we hope to address them as part of this hour. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd absolutely encourage everybody to do that. I can see quite a few folks have joined us online already. So don't be shy. Just jump in, type in your question, and the social team will pick it up and bring it in for you. Okay, David Paul. I'm going to welcome David to the panel. It's his first appearance today on Level Up. He's the practice director for data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning over at QA here in the UK. He has a background in computer science and through his work at the University of Oxford, has been involved in various startups, including things like Mind Foundry, if you're aware of that, and Curious.ai. David also works on the main board, as a main board director, rather, of Tech UK, and we're delighted to welcome him to the Level Up panel. So welcome, David.
Thank you very much, Nick, and great to be here and looking forward to a great discussion with everybody.
Okay, thank you so much indeed. Also, a new panelist for today is Helmut. Helmut Steigele is the lead coach over at CascadeIT, where he runs a training and coaching organization who really do focus on enterprise transformation as being the new normal, assisting their clients to identify and address early warning signs in their day-to-day work. Dr. Steigele, I should give him his official title, holds a PhD in National Economic and Social Sciences as well. So welcome to Level Up, Helmut. Brilliant to have you on the panel.
Thank you very much. Best regards outside from here in Switzerland. Hope that I can answer specific questions concerning big data and artificial intelligence. And I hope there will be a lot of surprises there. Thank you.
I hope so too. Thank you very much. We need a bit of energy, don't we, on a Monday morning or a Monday afternoon for Sarbojit, because he's, of course, in Singapore. So we'll keep you going, Sarbojit, through to your early evening. All right, very good. Joining us from the IT city, Bangalore, in southern India, is, of course, our question master for today, Suchitra Jacob. Suchitra, hi. Welcome back to Level Up again.
Hi, Nick. Hi to the panelists and our viewers. And I can't wait to ask the questions on today's topic.
Okay, all right, excellent. Well, let's jump straight in. We've got lots of questions already stacking up for us. So, Suchitra, if we may, let's have our first question for the panel.
Our first question is from our panelist, Sachin. Can you provide an overview by what is meant by big data and how this differentiates from machine learning and AI?
Okay, all right. Ahmad, could you start us off on this one, please?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, very fundamentally, what does the big data mean? It has been interpreted differently in the different parts of the world, but primarily what exactly it is the combination of structured and unstructured data. When we talk about the structured data, when we talk about the tabular form of the data with the tuples and the columns in a database table, and when we talk about the unstructured data, that includes everything what we can think of. That could be a voice record, could be an image, that could be a video, and so forth. And interestingly, I mean, collectively, that whole volume, when we talk about the big data, we talk about volumes of the data. That's why, for a layman term, it appeared to be referred as a big data or a data of a big size. In order to answer the second part of the question, indeed, it is. We are almost into the era of artificial intelligence, when the whole world is seeing and started observing the transformation in terms of development of the information systems, the way we design our systems, the decision support systems with the help of machine learning and so forth. So primarily the machine learning is the engine where our data has been input or to process in order to infer the decisions. That's how any of the AI layer works in any system. So artificial intelligence and big data works hand in hand with each other. And when we talk about the other components or the pillars of the technology stack, where the data has been delivered through either through the cloud service or any other means with the cyber secured manner. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you. Yeah, you have indeed. And you've triggered quite a number of thoughts kind of in my mind. So I think you're right. I think the term big data is used very broadly. It's mean quite different things in many organizations. But one thing is for sure, there's an awful lot of it. I can't quite remember off the top of my head how much data the world is generating every year, but there are some theories around the rate of the expansion of the amount of data that we're producing as a society. So we'll come back to some of those metrics, but for sure, there's an awful lot of it out there. So thank you so much, Ahmad, for getting us going. Sarbojit, your thoughts on this, please.
Yeah, hi. Well, great. Ahmad gave us a good start. So just a small thing, I would like to mention two specific things. One is trying to understand big data. There are a few things. What I talk about is DIKW, where the data, and when the data is processed, we get some information, and that is about the past. And then when we get a good number of data, then we get knowledge about things, and that's what we are trying to do. So we are trying to harness into a huge amount of data, structured, unstructured, and we are not only stopping there. We want to predict the future, and then for that purpose, we want to have data from not only one area, but multiple areas, aspects, and domains. And then when we collect that, what we get is wisdom, and that helps us to predict, and that is what is big data is all about. And big data helps us to do that, and we are using the technology of AI as a technology to process that, and a machine learning to do the modeling, to help us to, so that we don't have to code everything for the machine. The machine will know a few things and be able to take a decision on our behalf. And we have seen that a lot of such practices are there. Now, well, of course, people think big data ML means there will be a robot that comes and does take away our jobs. Well, it's not that much, but yes, big data is there, and it is the new oil, and it is the new currency to be even more, right? Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Now, Sachin, I'm going to come to you in a moment. I'm going to have a go at trying to do this, and I'm probably not the best person, but I'm probably one of the armchair big data people who are kind of on the panel today. So with your patience, I'll have a go at putting these things into context. So first of all, I think that Ahmad did a really great job, actually, of talking about big data. In the past, it used to be always very structured. So if you're as old as I am, you probably remember things like very large relational databases, data warehouses, and organizing your data into schemas and figuring all of that out and this kind of stuff. And then along came unstructured data, and it became really complicated. And in retailing, people started to observe shopper behaviors in the aisles of supermarkets and things, and see how long they lingered over particular promotional offers and this kind of stuff. And so incorporating all of that unstructured data as well as the structured content, we got this concept of big data and the data lake, and technologies like Hadoop and the others, to be able to start to exploit all of that. Now, then we get into the whole area of AI and machine learning. I would say that machine learning is a subsection of AI, that when you've got a large amount of information, you can use machines to exploit that information and start to build patterns and so on. But actually, to go beyond and start generating ideas from that, that's when you need an AI layer to be able to build on top of the machine learning that has already taken place. So that would be my kind of armchair version of it. Sachin, what was in your mind when you were exploring this with the panel?
Sure. So it's always difficult to add any value when coming at the end of the panel discussion, especially after such great introductions by Ahmad. So exactly right. It's going from structured data within silos to real-time synchronizing of data, of structured, unstructured, and external data, for example, from web scraping, using, for example, an AI interface, which which people are aware of, for example, with ChatGPT. The only thing to potentially add is that you've got the 3 or the 6 V's. So the big 3 V's are like volume, veracity, for example, of the data, and like the variety of the data that you're having to contend with in terms of creating a pooled data lake. The only other thing to kind of elaborate on further, and it's a bit of a detailed point, is that machine learning is not one technique. It's a variety of algorithms out there. For example, terms like row importance, attribute importance, and it's very important to kind of in the first instance, to understand the problems that you're trying to solve. So there's a variety of machine learning algorithms out there, and please do explore those techniques in order to understand how they can solve individual problems of yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I love that quote. David, I'll come to you in a moment, if I may. I love that quote. I'm just going to play it back to you. When you're thinking about data, big data, think about the volume, veracity, and variety. And I thought that was absolutely fantastic. So thank you, Sachin, if I've got that right. That's a really good takeaway for us. David, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so just to add to what has already been said, and what do we mean by big data and how that differentiates from machine learning and AI? So the data sets, we're in a world now of just the most enormous data sets, diverse, highly unstructured. What we at the machine learning group at Oxford used to call steel and grease data. So steel and grease data is data that lives in the real world. It's not beautifully curated toy data that you work on in academic labs. It's the real world, and it's gappy, it's messy, it's heterogeneous. It comes from many, many different devices, and somehow you've got to assimilate all of that data into one place. And the data sets are now getting larger and larger and being fed into what you might call hyper-parameterized models. So we just heard about ChatGPT and what OpenAI have been doing. Their latest model, I think, has about 1 trillion parameters. So these are models which are enormous and require huge amounts of data to be shoveled into them, to train them and to get inference at the end of the process. And we're now able to build on models like Google Translate that's been around for a number of years. So they started with large language and language translation models with the United Nations data set. So Google basically took all of the United Nations data, which I think is translated into, it's either 6 or 8 different languages. And they said, can we build a large model that's able to handle all of this data? And things have just developed on from there. But I think it's important to remember that the models still do the same thing. No matter how complex, how large the model, whether it's an AI model or it's a statistical machine learning model, what you're getting out at the end of the day is a prediction. It's a number between 0 and 1. I'm even ChatGPT. I believe that the next word I should put into this sentence is the word because, and I'm 0.98% sure that should be the next word. And really, in some ways, nothing has moved on, but everything has moved on because the volume of the data that we have.
Yeah, with some really good points there. And I think we'll come back to the whole kind of large language model and how ubiquitous it is becoming, and some of the, kind of early adopter myths, I think, which are surrounding it just right now as the world starts to get to grips with it. Couple of final thoughts on this, fairly briefly, panel, if we can, Sarbojit, and then we'll hear from Helmut.
Yeah, right. You mentioned about some of the V's, the volume, the value, the variety, the velocity. Then we also have the veracity, which is the truth, how correct the data is, and variability, how from different sources that they come. So these are all the things that for big data is very critical.
Thank you so much. That veracity, the concept of accuracy in data, of course, requires really good questions to be asked of the data set and for you to ask questions and be comfortable statistically with uncertainty and your degree of confidence. Helmut, your final thoughts on this, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, concerning big data, I'm answering more the question under the perspective of how is it seen by CEOs or by chief risk officers or the senior level, because they do not care about data. They care about signals. They care about indicators. They care about looking out for their companies, what's happening out there. And given the case, I give them a picture. I always tell them, look, you are in a submarine in the deep sea. If you have a ton of signals and can see anything, so you are out in the fog. And fog means that's big data. And the discipline to get out from that fog, a form of structure, a form of pattern, and a form of cluster with a sonar. Then you've reached the big data discipline as a practice. If you go back there, the next step and to switch on the light because you've realized that there's a structure out there. You've switched on the artificial intelligence because it assists you for the next reasoning. And given the case, you have specific patterns and specific mechanisms internalized in your submarine crew by techniques, which gives you the potential next step. That's then machine learning, which assists you to take the next decision. So the main question always is there, how do we bring additional intelligence into our company to be aware that there's something happening outside? And then big data is used there as a term without having any technobabble in there at the executive level.
Okay.
So that's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much indeed. Thank you very much. What a great start to our episode today. We're just going to jump over into social and kind of see who is with us this morning. So Idara, thank you so much for joining from Abuja in Nigeria and the very beautiful city of Hamilton in Canada being represented. It's very late for you at night, still Sunday night, I think, for Gautier, who is joining us from over there in Canada. And Ridwan joins us as well from Nigeria. So brilliant to have you online with us today. Greg is a regular viewer now. Greg Zuccarini, thank you so much for joining from Cape Town in South Africa, where Nigel was telling me it's a little chilly at the moment as it's winter time for you. So never mind. Hopefully the weather will improve for you guys pretty soon. Suchitra, I imagine that it's pretty warm actually in Bengaluru at the moment, warm and wet perhaps. Let's take our next question for the panel if we can.
Sure. Our next question is from Helmut, our panelist. Is there a context between operational risk management and big data?
Well, there's certainly a challenge here, isn't there, between the folks who are trying to govern operational risk and mitigate, manage operational risk in their business and the use of big data across an enterprise. Sarbojit, you get involved a lot with this kind of work with your clients. What thoughts do you have?
Yeah, and interestingly, a few weeks back, when I was in the panel, we talked about that any kind of risk, operational risk, or any technology risk is actually a part of enterprise risk. So the people at the top who are managing the enterprise risk, they have a huge task to understand the potential threats that may cause them a harm from millions and millions of potential sources of the threats. So now we have to understand that what really matters, what will make or break. So to do that, then they have to collect the data from different sources to understand the threats. And from the threats, they will then be able to understand the actual risk what may cause them a loss. So when we talk about this operational risk management and big data, well, today big data is a great help because it helps us to, as we talk about structured and unstructured data. So previously we didn't have the ability to include the unstructured data. Now with data, big data, we can do all these, and we have the ability of AI and ML. So that is a great help for the risk management for an enterprise and make an informative decision so that the organization can be steered to a much lesser risk, path.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Sarbojit. I think the organisation's risk appetite is going to vary depending on which industry you're in, and how which regulatory framework or legal framework you may be operating in. But it's a very important correlation of one to the other. Ahmad, your thoughts, please, and then we'll hear from Sachin.
Yeah, so just to add on what Sarbojit has mentioned already, so operation risk is a very important management function where the risk has been assessed all around the organization in order to ensure that all the mitigation factors have been implemented to ensure the continuity of business operations. So hence that said, management requires a very reliable source of indicators, which we generally refer as KRIs or key risk indicators, which basically helps them identifying the pain points in the organization and where the more efforts, time, and resources needs to be deployed in order to ensure the productivity is maximized as well as the continuity is ensured. So how it's been achieved is, of course, the big data is unnegotiable or non-negotiable solution. The data sources all around the organization needs to be collected, and based on the historical patterns which has been developed, that's been presented in the dashboard, executive dashboards, where the management is just picking up yes, when we need to, for example, focus on if we are facing a shortage of talented staff, we are facing a shortage of ABC resources. So there is a very strong link between operation risk management as a whole in terms of the tools which this function needs to present the KRIs to the executive management, and that tools have been the fuel of those tools is coming from the big data. I hope I answered the question.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that you have done. One of the acronyms you mentioned there was KRIs. Could you just expand on that a little bit, just for folks who are less familiar with the abbreviation?
Yeah, it's a very most common term which has been used all around the globe is KPIs, which is key performance indicators, which are being used to monitor the performance of any business process or business department or function. However, on the other side, the risks around the organization, which is generally in a layman terminology, which we call it as what can go wrong, is a risk. So if we identify that thing, for example, that if we are not been able to collect our money from the market, we may gonna get into a situation of short of cash flow problems. So that is a risk. So that is being monitored, that what is the level of the current risk we are facing at the moment is being monitored through the RI, which is key risk indicator. And through that thing, we can monitor that the risks are reaching to the defined threshold of any organization. So threshold is generally related to the risk appetite for any organization. I hope
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for clarifying key risk indicators and also the risk threshold. So it's really super important. Thank you so much. Sachin, final thoughts on this?
Yeah, so the reason for putting the hand up is I a part of the Institute of Risk Management, Risk and Complexity, SEG. And this is a real issue for us that across industries such as nuclear, major infrastructure projects. The reason why is if you compare Crossrail, which was the major project for the last couple of decades, that is like a quarter of the size of HS2. And simply put, the old way of approaching projects, like, which we used to do around 20 years ago, was never envisaged to be able to be applied on programs the scale of HS2. And so you have to then develop new approaches. So what is the problems that you're trying to solve is things such as like, what is the safety likelihood of safety instance? If I delay, for example, a sequence of activities, what's the add-on in terms of my carbon footprint? What are the quality issues? And so where big data can help is it can look, for example, if you imagine that you can copy in terms of your commercial exchanges, you can have like chatbots like Alexa, listening into your commercial communication to identify commercial risks before that they occur by looking at the sentiment of the language and looking at the severity in terms of the language, and then producing heat maps to say, okay, these risk managers therefore need to go and speak to these project teams. There are obviously GDPR considerations, but picking up in terms of Ahmed's points, in terms of key risk indicators, then what you can then do is you can say, okay, because these issues are happening on this project, this is going to affect this higher benefit for our business. An example is, for example, if you don't replace, for example, water pipes, then you're going to have water sewage issues, which is something which is happening in the UK, or you will have power outages issues, which is happening in South Africa. So those are the externalizations of the key risk indicators. I'll defer now to David because he's going to wipe the floor with us.
Hardly.
Not at all. Not
Yeah.
at all.
No.
Not at all.
Yeah.
David, I'll come to you. I'll come to you in a moment. But I think just for the benefit of the viewers who are joining us from other countries, the UK's HS2 is to do with high-speed rail in the UK. So we're a small island, and when we do infrastructure, it impacts a lot of people. And so these projects are very large, very complex pieces of infrastructure engineering. So just a little bit of an explainer there. David, your thoughts on operational risk management and big data?
Yeah, so the sort of positive and negative, really. So on the negative side, one thing you have to be very careful of is bias and heuristics. So there's the old saying that the sort of ghost of your data resides in any model that you're building. So if you're building an AI machine learning model, if there is bias and heuristics in that data, that will reside there, and it's very hard to remove. But on the positive side, in terms of a link between operational risk and big data, then if you look at people like Bezos, who runs Amazon, he sees it as incredibly positive. So he looks for, his big sort of North Star metric for running Amazon is, where is the friction in the organization? And how can I use data to remove that friction? So where are the friction points? And where does the data back up? And then how do we remove that problem? And so, for any normal retailer, they look at Amazon and say, Amazon can change pricing on 50 million products 6 times an hour. And, why can't we as a, Walmart, why can't we change our pricing once a week, or once a day? It's absolutely phenomenal. So there is certainly a context between operational risk, and the operational risk for Bezos is that they're losing revenue if they're not constantly changing their pricing. So it's sort of positive and negative, really.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's when organizations think differently, then they're able to architect a very different level of service, and we've seen that. And one of the most simplistic examples of that that I have in my mind from Amazon was when they launched the 1 hour service within metropolitan areas of different cities around the world. They began to cluster the products together in the warehouses that most people bought together. So by having the knowledge that when people bought product X, they also tended to buy product Y, and then putting both of those items pretty close to each other, actually physically in the warehouse, then you're much more likely to be able to meet that 1 hour deadline of criticality to deliver that service. Extraordinary thinking that really helped them to crack that new level of service excellence. So very good. Thank you very much indeed, panel. A great question, Helmut. So thank you so much for putting it to the rest of the panel. Let's move on, Suchitra, if we can, and we'll take our next question, please.
Our next question is a live question from Wondimu. Most big data is often stored in the cloud. How could enterprises tackle the challenges of big data security and governance?
So it's great having things in the cloud, but getting them up into the cloud and down from the cloud always represents a degree of risk to one extent or another. Helmut, why don't you start us off on this one, please?
Yeah, the question here is, if you do not rule it before in policies and in rules and in operational control with the cloud provider, you cannot answer the question, because you scale up a resource on demand, you disperse the resources because you calculate maybe on different sources, and if you do not check where is the data come from, how is it filtered, how is it accessed, how is it validated, and how is it brought back in form of reports and insights, and if you do not track that path, and if you do not track what is ruled along the different clouds, along a shared responsibility model between the consumers and the processors, you are out of the game, because that's not sure. So before you think using data from the cloud or stored in the cloud, think about where is it stored, how is it sourced, who can access, and how often it is refreshed, or maybe when it is deleted and gone. And do it contractually before, implement policies, and implement automations in the system that specific preservations are made before you start using excessive cloud for enterprise big data operations. That would be my recommendation on it.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. A large number of governments around the world have taken a very nationalistic view towards cybersecurity and have introduced legislation some time ago for where personal data may be stored, often asking for organizations to store citizens' data locally within the within the boundaries of the reach of the law of that particular country. So you've seen things like the European Union approach to that, and the also the governments of places like Australia and so on, insist that certain data is held, within their jurisdiction. So that's often the case, I suppose. The challenge also comes, I think, with how you're moving that data around. As it moves from one server to another in a data center, are you actually leaving one dedicated area, which is within the jurisdiction of a particular legal framework, and moving into another one? So you do need to think about that as you build out a more hybrid cloud set of services and solutions. Ahmad, your thoughts on this, please.
Right. So the first thing is, when I would like to highly appreciate the person who have asked this question. This question is basically needs hours to cover up. So I'll try to be as short as possible. So primarily, the data security is a journey. As far as the data governance is concerned, when any organization who do not have a properly defined data governance, we cannot achieve the effective data security controls. What I meant by that, when data governance includes the data ownership needs to be defined in the organization very first. Second thing is the data, where it's been stored, how it's been retrieved, how it's been accessed, modified, and discarded. The data life cycle has to be defined in any organization in order to identify those what can go wrong points in any organization embedded within the business processes. That's where we're going to be incorporating the data security controls. So data security as a journey, it starts with the very fundamental concept of data classification based on the sensitivity. First of all, any organization, as part of the governance model, needs to be able to know that where the data is stored, it needs to be discovered within the organization, especially when it's being stored in the cloud. So what data is sensitive to the organization and what is not will be answered through the data classification exercise. So organization has to develop a data classification policy and a framework and define the roles and responsibilities for that. And then the second stage is that secure the perimeter of the organization or digital perimeter of the organization by implementing an effective data leakage prevention technology. Third thing is that how the data has been exchanged. As Nick rightly mentioned, that's very important these days, governing the regulations around in the regions, such as GDPR, very much like concern about how the data has been exchanged, particularly when it comes to the PII, the personally identifiable information. So is the data being exchanged within the organization or external parties or across borders? So all those rules needs to be defined within the data security policy. So this is the answer of the second part of the question. So now this is like when we talk about most of the first part of the question is like most often the big data has been stored on the cloud. Yes, the cloud adoption has been increased rapidly from past couple of decades, though, because of its mobility and the empowerment which cloud gives to the organization. It helps reducing the cost. It helps bringing more enhanced level of compliance to the security and standards and the regulations. However, the data which is being stored on-premise or on-prem is equally important and has to be governed by the same data security policies and the frameworks. I hope I answer the question as short as possible.
Well, I agree with you. I think there's a whole consulting assignment, that could be there. And one of the things that I would actually encourage people to do, and Ahmad, with your patience, I'd actually encourage them to join. If I may just follow up with you, I think that you run a network for people who want to, continuously professionally develop and discuss, not just this topic, but actually a whole range of different related topics. So could you just talk about that just in a couple of sentences, and then we'll put a link through in the chat for the audience to be able to find it.
Thank you very much, Nick, for considering that, or giving me the opportunity to share that effort, my small piece of effort, which I've been contributing into the knowledge sharing community, which I refer as a community of cyber intellectuals, and I named it as a Cytellite. It can be found on and the YouTube channel as well. Primarily, it is the community of cyber intellectuals and the related the professionals and like-minded people who can come on board and contribute their knowledge and experience into the community and have a social positive impact back to the community.
Thank you so much indeed. We'll follow up with that. We'll get that posted into the LinkedIn chat so that folks can find it. Sarbojit, final thoughts on this, and then we're going to move on.
Yeah. So the final thoughts would be, to start at the very beginning, which is as a part of governance, we must have to do a very good due diligence of our cloud providers. And we have to also understand if our requirements will be fulfilled by them. So we have to then work on the contracts and the agreements that we have to sign, and we have to agree on them at the very beginning. And then only we'll be able to ensure that all the data requirements will be fulfilled. And big data in the cloud is of course good because of this, variety, veracity, and volume and the velocity components. It is very, very costly to do it or host it other than cloud. So I would say that are the final things from my end. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that you're right, and the how you architect your cloud is very important. So the role of people like, not just the data protection officers now that are really encouraged in organizations large and small, but also the solution architects as well. The very close working is needed, and sometimes from time to time as well, you need to just make sure that your current understanding of the statutory and the regulatory framework that you're working in is actually up to date. So do reach out to colleagues. Not everything you read on the internet is true. Just saying. All right. So if you have a feeling about it that something's not quite right, there's a strong chance you'll be better off actually asking somebody who really knows rather than just somebody who's guessing. Do feel free, by the way, if you're watching today, to reach out to any of the panel, as all of their LinkedIn bios are on the APMG International website. So you can connect with them online if you would like to. All right, very good. Suchitra, I think we've got time for one last question. Thank you, Wandimo, by the way. Brilliant question. Let's fit one more in before we finish.
Sure, we have a live question from Greg. How can we use heterogeneous big data to preemptively reduce risks in infrastructure and strategic projects?
Okay, well, it's a great question, Greg. And, one that I thought about, historically in the UK. So I'm going to come back with my thoughts in a moment. Sachin, why don't you start us off and then we'll hear from Helmut.
Sure. So when we talk about heterogeneous data, we're talking about data which is diverse in character. And this picks up on Ahmad's point at the beginning, where we're talking about data which is different in its structure, perhaps less structured or unstructured, and it's coming from different data sources. So the first thing is how is this data collected? How do you do a data stock take? And then how is this synchronized? Despite the big hype in terms of machine learning data and about AI in the infrastructure industry, especially in the UK, what we also have to recognize is that there's a big digital divide between the tier 1 contractors and then the tier 3 contractors. So whereas at the tier 1 level and the client level, you may be talking about machine learning and AI, at the tier 3 level, they still haven't used new products such as Microsoft Flow, Power Automate in order to do workflow automation. The key thing in the first instance is to verify the problems that you're trying to solve, whether it be schedule, cost, quality, safety, and so on. And then identify where that data is coming from. So, for example, do a stock take. Then identify, how is that data going to be, for example, combined, and what are the problems that you're going to be wanting to solve out of it. So if you can just logically work through those 4 steps, you can begin your data journey.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. I do like the idea of the data stock take. Just taking a moment, just thinking about the heritage of that data, if I can use that word, and why it may be relevant and how it might be relevant in your considerations. Helmut, your thoughts, please, and then we'll hear from David.
I would take the approach along the big data process, because if I have an infrastructure in the strategic project, I always enter new territory, unknown territory. And if I'm entering new territory or unknown territory, with the background building there something or achieving there something like in an ecosystem, I always take the intelligence cycle or the big data cycle, where you think before, where do I enter? How can I describe the environment there? And then I draft the guardrails along the heterogeneous environment, and then I ask, which questions shall I ask? Which questions shall I have answered? In the sense of, where are the deviations and where are the leading forces in there in the field I enter? So I break down the heterogeneity a little bit more in a structure. Then I collect the data sources. And after the data sources I have collected, I look to validation, I look to structural analytics, I look to pattern analytics, I look to clusters. And then I can use maybe machine learning and artificial intelligence to get out the very, very first questions about reasoning what can happen in there. And if I am able to ask the questions, what is happening in there? I have the very, very first baseline for project risk or for risk domains within an infrastructure project. On the other side, if you don't take the procedural approach, I would like to refer to a man you've heard maybe years ago. Ever heard the name Igor Ansov and the SWOT analysis? Igor Ansov has described that in disruptive environments, you scan permanently for deviations, whatever deviation is there, and then you cluster out, and then you monitor what are the driving factors in this scanned environment. So you break down from unstructured to structured, and then you see the different parts of the heterogeneous environment. And if you go deeper and analyze, you may react and you may run the SWOT analysis and the strategic analysis processes you have to consider if you set up a strategic project like infrastructure, or maybe entering a new market, or entering maybe the space like Jeff Bezos. So that would be my answer.
Thank you so much indeed, Helmut. David, your thoughts on heterogeneous big data reducing risk?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. So I'm always reminded of the quote from Jan LeCun, the professor of machine learning and AI at New York University, who's also, I think, now the research director of Meta Group. And he says, in the future, most of the data in the world is going to be created by machines, and it will simply reside and live inside machines, whether it's it's an autonomous vehicle, it's some IoT data, it's data spinning off mobile phones. It's this heterogeneous world is very interesting. But what we can do is to start to build data sets that are quite rich and quite nuanced. And we start to use data as a proxy for experience. So rather than having to use a team of experts with decades of experience, you can start to build data sets where you're using proxy, that data is a proxy for experience. And then within that, as we've just heard from Helmut, you can look for anomalies in the data. So where has a specific anomaly happened? Any particular change points? So has the data fundamentally changed? And you can do this now at scale, because these things are operating so quickly that simply humans sitting there trying to monitor things, it's totally ineffective now. If you think about, we were talking at the beginning of the show about just how much data there is in the world. And I know the Martin School at Oxford estimates that all the words ever spoken by humans ever in history is about 5 exabytes of data. But last year on the internet, there were 1,500 exabytes, 1.5 zettabytes of data. So 300 times more data created in 1 year simply on the internet than has ever been spoken by human beings in history. This is the scale of the situation that we're now dealing with.
Absolutely. And there were more than the fair share of pictures of cats amongst all of that data as well. So, so thank you, David. Yeah, I agree. I think one of the challenges for human beings, and we're going to come to closing remarks in a minute, panel, but just to kind of finish off on this, Greg, is that we've often used diverse sets of data as a way of being able to plan better complex projects, particularly infrastructure or strategic projects at a national level. In the past, it was done in person. People would go and attend a public hearing of some kind or another, different structures in different countries and so on. And they would put their case based on their opinions, either expert or subjective, about the impact or the benefit or the risk or the unintended consequence, of building things. And while some communities celebrated the building of a bridge, others warned of the consequences of joining up two environments that were previously separated by, water or by a deep ravine or, these kinds of things. And we've done this throughout human history. There's been debate and discussion. As David said, I think very eloquently, the rate at which human beings can process amounts of data is limited, and computers are able to help us gather even wider data sets and interrogate them and come up with some thoughts and conclusions and so on. I suppose, though, we still need to get the human element in there. You need to feel as a community that your voice has been heard, and whether that is through social media or in person, it still seems to me to be a fundamental part of that planning and execution and refining and stakeholder engagement process, perhaps. But that may be a topic for another day. So, panel, let's hear your closing remarks for today, if we can. We do have some technical problems that we're working on behind the scenes for Ahmad. But Sachin, why don't you start us off, and then we'll go to Helmut next.
Sure. I was just internally reflecting on the fact that we've all collectively in the world gone through a major big data exercise in the last couple of years through COVID, where whatever you kind of believed in terms of what the data sets were saying to you, what we all collectively failed was to be able to explain that to the wider community and to the wider public in order for us to go on that journey following that big data exercise together. So it's not only, for example, a machine learning, a data exercise, it is also about the next step, which is communicating the wider kind of narrative to the general public, which may be data illiterate compared to the people producing the data models. Practical stuff, please do reach out in terms of the LinkedIn groups, in terms of practical help, in terms of helping to create benchmark groups and threshold settings and how to train your machine models. And hopefully this is just a beginning of a conversation with the wider community, but do use the LinkedIn functionality to challenge us on practical examples.
Okay, thank you so much indeed. Helmut, briefly, and then David.
Yeah, finally, I close this session with a recommendation I always give to the risk officers and the executive officers of the companies I consult. I give a citation: the quicker you see a deviation and the more time you have to react on it, the better is your disposition or exposition in the area. So if you use big data for reasoning, for collecting, and for structuring, you save time, and you extend your area where you recognize something which is risky for you. So use big data as assistance for your own risk management and for your own improvement in the company. That's it.
Thank you so much indeed. Thank you very much for joining as well today, Helmut. Great to have you on the panel. David, final thoughts, and then we'll hear from Sarbojit.
Yeah, I mean, literally, we're just at the start of this journey, and it's been brought together by huge volumes of data. Everybody's drunk the big data Kool-Aid and stored everything that they possibly can and captured everything. Link that now with more advanced AI, machine learning models, and then just hugely advanced compute power, GPU power, and then literally, who knows when, quantum computing. Quantum will happen, and then you can start to explore incredible data sets. So I think the future really in terms of disease and managing things like disease and new understanding the human genome. It's 20 years since the Human Genome Project, and we've really done very little with it. That will change very quickly, I think, over the coming years. And then also things like exploration, so deep space and an understanding through, things like the Square Kilometre Array, that massive array of telescopes stretching from Australia to South Africa, massive data sets coming in. So I think the future is just going to be incredible.
It's a very exciting time to be alive on the planet. No, I agree with you. Thank you so much, David. Great contribution today, my friend. So thank you for joining. Sarbojit, your reflections on today, and then we'll hear from Suchitra.
Yeah, let me first thank for all the contributors, all those who gave us the live questions or even to Slido. It was really a very encouraging thing, and also I learned a lot about it. Before I end, let me talk about Jeffrey Moore's one quote. He's an author and consultant. He said, "Without big data analytics, companies are blind and deaf and wandering into the web like a deer on a freeway."
Okay.
Quite.
Well, it's a really good kind of salutary moment, isn't it, for us to think about our maturity in approaching, this kind of thing. So thank you very much, Sarbojit. Definitely food for thought there. Unfortunately, we can't connect back to Ahmad. He's lost his connection into the studio today, but we'll work on that and get him back in the future. Suchitra, your closing remarks, please.
Some great thoughts and reflections from our panelists. So thank you to all of you. And of course, we have a lot of questions still stacked up. So we should get back to on this topic again. And thank you to our viewers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We will do indeed. And thank you so much to our producers online. You've put some excellent questions to the panel. And on your behalf, I'd like to thank the panel for everybody. Thank you very much indeed, Mohammed, for your contribution. Mohammed Chavoshi joined us again today, and Peter Karamuna has also joined in the discussion online. So thank you very much indeed for joining us today. We will come back to this topic. Now, if you put in a question, then you'll find your name in the credits at the end of the show in a few moments. So do stay on for that. Over on the website, you can find the answers to more than 1,500 previously asked questions. It's really comprehensive now, and it connects you with more than 200 experts from all over the world, different topics, different disciplines. And don't forget that you can listen to the audio versions of the shows on your preferred podcast platform. Now, this Friday, on the 14th of July at 2 p.m. UK time, we're going to be exploring perfect project teams. Do they exist? And how do you go about building yours? Monday the 17th, we're going to be looking at the world of Agile as we ask the key question as whether being Agile was really the same as just knowing Scrum, or is there more to it than that? Kind of think that we might know the answer already. And then on the 21st, we're going to be looking at the exciting area of using AI and automation in business, which, if you've enjoyed today's discussion, I would thoroughly recommend that you bookmark. So head over to the YouTube channel and subscribe there, please, and then click on the little bell, and it will give you a reminder which makes it super easy. Subscribe to the show online, and we'll send you a personal summary of what's coming up and how you too can join us here on the panel and level up your career with APMG. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thank you.